Hi everyone and welcome. I'm Olivier Colson. I'm a developer at Odoo. I've been there for a few years, so it might not be the first year you see me. And today I'm here to tell you about the new accounting reports in v16. So we actually changed a lot of things this year, pretty much everything. And so this talk is really about explaining the big picture and giving you the keys to understand how it works. So I'm not going to dive into the technical details too much. Plus, I have only 20 minutes, so I have to be quick. So let's get started. So first, a small reminder about what's important when you're doing accounting reporting, okay? There are actually two big challenges that you have to handle. The first one is the volume of data, because indeed, if you're familiar with accounting, you know that regular accounting, medium-sized accounting, is millions of journal items. And so you have to handle that in your reporting engine, because it will have to support the charge. Second thing is the variation, because depending on your country, depending on the legal requirements, depending on small things that are only done in your country, there are things that you will have to handle in your engine and that you won't have to handle in other countries, or that will be very different. So that brings us to two big ways of solving the issue. The first one is to have one generic framework to do everything. So this could be seen as a very nice way of doing it because, you know, you have one big piece of code that handles everything, and then, well, once you need to add a feature for something, you just touch the big piece of code, and in the future, if you have the same problem to solve, it will already be solved. But the problem with that is that it gets more and more complex as you add features in it. And so over time, it can become really difficult to maintain. Second option is to go for a full case-by-case approach and have dedicated pieces of code for each report you do. So this might be seen as well as a nice approach because you're way more flexible with that. The problem is that as time goes, you have more and more pieces of code doing exactly the same thing or nearly the same thing, and at the end of the day, same thing, it's going to be super hard to maintain. So what we do in Odoo is we have we mix both approaches actually. So we have we made families of reports, and each of these family received an engine for itself. That's what we did in v15. And sometimes you have things that are too specific, and they receive an engine of their own, and so that's what we call custom reports. And there we're more using the case-by-case approach. So that's what we used to do. That's still a bit what we do now. And just to recall you what the big actors of the situation are, let me tell you a small legend about the accounting reports in 15. So one went to financial reports for their high coverage. One went to the tax reports for ease of tax management. One went to the accounting reports and their grouping abilities. And others went to custom reports to handle two specific cases. So those were basically the engines we were using back in the day. And so this was working really nice, but there were two big limitations with that we had to handle when starting the work on v16. So first thing, a big one, is that it's not possible to mix engines. So as I told you, we made like families of reports, each with its dedicated engine. And the problem with that is that if you're in a family yourself with your report, but you need something that is only working on another family, you can't have it because it's another engine. So it's not compatible. If you want to do these kind of things, you have to do for a full custom report. And so that's not very handy. Second thing is that it was impossible with the old engines to have more than one columns in a report that was not Python defined directly. And so that was annoying because in some countries you need that. Plus, the user cannot define by the interface Python defined reports. So those reports there couldn't be just custom made by the user in their database. And so, well, you feel it coming. This is now working in v16. And I have already written a small legend about it as well. So one goes to v16, so one engine to roll them all, one engine to merge them all, one engine to roll them all, and in the code base bind them. So essentially what we did is that we removed all those different engines and put one thing to replace them all. So it's not totally the super generic framework approach that I was talking about earlier. Instead, we have one super generic framework and small little bits that are specialized and doing the job of the former reports from v16. So let's have a look at the different objects that are involved in this new framework that we introduced. So super straightforward, actually. So you have reports. So yeah, one object per report in each country. So for the developers among you, small detail, those reports used to be abstract models in v16 sometimes. So you have financial report, tax reports that were stored. Now everything is stored, so it's way more generic than before. Report lines, so again, super straightforward. So a report is basically a list of report lines. Columns, so that's a new object. As I told you, we handle, we give the possibility to the user to add columns in their reports, and we can have multi-column reports now. So you can have lines with different formulas in each columns thanks to this object. So every time you define a new column object for the report, we'll see an example later. And expressions. So this one is a bit trickier to understand. Basically, an expression is a subvariable, or can be seen as a subvariable used by a report line. Let's see just an example for that. So this is the form view of a report line. So this one comes from the Belgian tax report. And what you see at the bottom of the screen in the list view are the expressions linked to this report line. And so here you can see that we have only one expression. So this expression, as I told you, it's roughly a variable. So it has a name, the label, balance here, and it has to receive a value, right? So we need to know how to compute the value that goes into that expression. And for this, we specify a computation engine on the expression, so here, tax tags, and we specify a formula that will be interpreted by this computation engine. And basically, that's it. This is doing the same job as a tax report line back in the day. And so for the ones of you that are familiar with it, formula is the equivalent of the tag name that was on the report line before. So another example is just to be sure that you get it. So again, it's a report line. This one comes from the generic balance sheet. And you can see that we have another computation engine on its expression. And this computation engine has a totally different formula that will here be interpreted as an Odoo domain, just like it was with financial reports in v16. So let's get to the more interesting things. So here is a report line coming from an Indian tax report, okay? And you can see that it defines multiple expressions. And each of these expressions has a different label, of course, because these are different variables, so you give them different names. And what is it used for? Basically, this report has multiple columns. And you can see that the label given to these expressions are actually also on the columns. So this is the form view of the report, and you have, well, a tab with all the columns that are defined for this report. And the columns each time give the expression label of the expression that they are going to use. So that means that the column is going to call the variable with this name and take its value and put it, when displaying the column, in the right cell. So super easy, super simple. Second example. So this one is again from the Belgian tax report, because yeah, I like it. And here you can see that we have multiple expressions as well, but it's not for multi-column. So actually, these expressions are used to compute sub amounts that need to be used in the computation of the reports. Here we even have a bunch of dedicated prefixes to the expression labels, so applied carryover or carryover. And this is handling, well, the carryover feature and the way these amounts will be displayed in the interface with little pop-ups and this kind of thing. So you have a bunch of reserved prefixes like that to handle those cases. But what's important here is that we are using multiple computation engines to compute different amounts on the same line. And so that's where the power of the new engine comes, because you can now mix things coming from different engines. So let's go for something totally different now, variance. So if you're familiar with the tax reports in v16, you know that they don't really work like balance sheets or profit and loss reports. I mean, from a UI point of view, the way you open it isn't the same, because when you're installing the Belgian localization, for example, the balance sheet and the profit and loss will create new menu items, so one for each of these reports, and so you will have new menu items for them on top of the other menu items. So if you have the French localization installed, you will have another menu item for the balance sheet, for the profit and loss in France, plus the generic one. So it makes a lot of things, it puts a lot of things in the menu. The tax report didn't work this way because for the tax report, you only had one menu item, and on the report, you had on the top right corner a selector for the different variants that were available, and for the one that you, you just had to click it and select the one you wanted. And so here, what we introduced in v16 is that we actually generalized this mechanism, and so all the reports work this way now. So when you're installing the Belgian balance sheet, it doesn't create any menu item anymore. It will just add an entry into the selector on the top right corner. That's what you see on the slide. On the top right corner of the screen, well, you'll just be able to switch between the generic report and the one for your localization. So it's a small thing, but it's a big improvement for usability because all the menus are now way more lightened. Next one, manual values. If you're Spanish, this one is interesting for you. So basically, in the past, when we needed to have a manual value in a report, so for example, the tax rate that will be applied on some operations for you, things like that, things that cannot be computed by Odoo, the only way to handle that was to have a wizard opening when clicking the menu item to open the report, input the values manually, and then it would open the report. But the problem with that is that those values didn't persist in the database. And so at the end of the day, every time you needed to reopen the report, you needed to re-input all the manual data. And so this was a bit painful, and we wanted to solve that. So now it's over. When you define an expression on the report line, you can tell it that it will be a manual value and it will be editable. And if you do so, you will see, just like on the screen, a little pencil, and when you click on this pencil, you will be able to just input your value directly, and it will persist in the database. So again, small thing, but big change. So let's now get to some technical concerns about all this, because if you're a developer, you might be wondering, okay, that's nice, but we changed a lot, well, they changed a lot of things, and what's the cost actually of this whole thing? So first thing that you might raise is, okay, we have one more level of hierarchy in objects that are involved on the reports with the expressions, because now you have the report, the lines, and then the expressions, plus the columns yet. So you might be wondering, well, isn't it going to be too much in the XML? And actually, you can see indeed on this example here that the syntax to declare an expression is quite verbose. It's true. But rest assured, because we have introduced shortcuts for that. So basically, if you're just using the default stuff for your expression, you don't need to set all the fields all the time. You just use a one-liner, the shortcut, that will define the formula of your expression. And in the backend, what it will do is that it will create this expression just as if you had used the complete thing. So small thing, but again, nice syntactic sugar. Another point you might raise, isn't it too complex? Because again, we add a lot of functionalities. A report engine is something complex. The old one was already quite complex. Isn't it worse than before? So here you can see a flame graph. So for the non-developers among you, a flame graph, basically the simplest way, so it's an oversimplification, I know, but the simple way to see it is the deeper it goes, the more complex it is. And so here you can see the graph for opening the generic balance sheet on a clean database with just the demo data. And so here you can see, yeah, well, it's actually fairly complex, and yeah, it looks awful. Let's be honest. But there's a trick, because actually this one comes from v15. And here's the one for v16 for the same operation. So as you can see, it looks way less complex. It still is, let's be honest. It's a reporting engine. But what I mean here is that we didn't make it worse at all. It's way more structured, way more flattened than before, and that's what it's interesting here. Another thing that I feel is coming if I don't talk about it myself, what about efficiency? So here you can see a bunch of graphs. So the three of them are they each correspond to a size of the database. Okay, So in green, you have v16. In red, you have v15. On the x-axis, the number of move lines, well, of journal items that are taken into account by the report in the period that is open. So that's important. It's not the number of move lines in the database. It's the number of move lines that we use for the computation of the report. And on the y-axis, you have the number of seconds that it takes to open the report. So here you have the general ledger. So that's a custom report. And you can see that it doesn't really change unless you go on really big size of database and a number of move lines. But again, is it realistic? Because that many move lines in a single period for the general ledger, yeah, not very likely to happen. But still, you can see that it doesn't change much. So it's good. We didn't want to improve this one with these functionalities. The generic balance sheet now. Again, here. Well, it's a lot of change, and you can see that it's way better than it used to be already because the model is more structured. So we gain a lot of time when computing the report. But the place where it really gets interesting is the Belgian balance sheet, because here we are like 10 times faster on really big databases. So it's not only the Belgian one, okay? I take this one as an example, but it's true for every balance sheet in localization modules and also for profit and loss reports. So it's a lot of reports that are now way, way faster than they used to be. Why is that so? Well, most of the lines in the reports are using the same engine. The engine is batching the computation while it was not done like that before. And essentially, we only have like 3-4 queries that are run to compute the whole report, while in the past you had one per report line. So I think, personally, I think that's the most interesting thing about this feature is that the reports are now blazing fast. And that will be my last slide for today. So thank you for attending the presentation. Thank you for your interest in what we do at Odoo, and especially in accounting. Enjoy Odoo experience, and I will now be available for the Q&A session. See you there.
Here and for the Q&A session, now we'll look what you wrote in it. If you have questions, just write them down there, and I will try my best to answer them now. If there's something that feels unclear, even after my explanation, don't hesitate to come and discuss with me on the accounting booth after this talk. So you know the rules. I let you ask your questions now. I want to thank you again for being at Odoo Experience. It was a blast to see you back in person. So thank you very much.
So,
hello, Antoine.
Thank you, Olivier, for this energetic talk to open the day. Let's start with a few questions of my own, and then we'll come back to the pen.
Sure, so that people have the time to write them.
Exactly. So my first one will be, I think, pretty simple, but is it still possible to use the horizontal group by feature?
Okay, so the horizontal group by, I'm sure a lot of people here don't know about this feature, but it's something that was available on the financial reports. So that's a very precise question. And so, is it still possible to do that? Not exactly in the same way as before, because the new design required us to change things around that feature that was just making the performance catastrophic. But it's still possible to do that with a new feature that I call the horizontal group. So it's kind of I don't know, a tribute to the horizontal group by. So it's not exactly a group by, but it's doing the same kind of things, and it's the same kind of use. So essentially, when you're doing a horizontal group, you're telling, okay, I want to put a horizontal group for all the values of this field of account move line that will match this domain. And you could put multiple conditions like that. So you could do a horizontal group by for the partners matching a given domain. And for these partners, each time have a group, well, equivalent of a horizontal group for each account matching another domain, for example. So yes, it's still possible to solve this kind of cases.
Thank you for the answer.
You're welcome.
Another question, can we still enable some filter through the UI in debug mode like we used to do it
Yes,
before?
and actually even more than before. Before, you could do that. So go in debug mode on the form view of the financial reports and enable some options that would then appear as filter on the reports. You could do that only for financial reports. So now you can do that for every report, including custom reports. So you could allow comparison, you could add filters for analytic values or remove them. And so you have way more room for very easy customization through the UI like that, and that's also a nice improvement, and it's just because we added this persistent model behind all the reports, including the custom ones. So.
Another clear and very complete answer. Thank you. So this new version will also introduce a new way to manage analytics. How will it be managed with what you just presented here?
By creating columns. So when you enable the analytic features in the reports, you will have this filter on top of it, and when you click it, you will be able to select a few analytic plans or analytic accounts, and the ones you selected will create a new column in the report that will repeat just as if it was a comparison, but it's doing or a horizontal group, but it will just repeat all the values of the report with this filter. And so for analytic values, the things you will have in this column are, well, the analytic values matching the conditions of each line of the report. So instead of querying the move lines there to tell it in a technical way, we will query the analytic lines. And you can even do anticipation by including analytic lines that have no related move line. And doing so, you can anticipate things in your report without having the actual journal entry behind it. And so it's pretty cool.
Thank you. You've talked about the manual values. Can you maybe give a bit more information on how it would be supported in the database?
Yeah. So technically speaking, the manual values are handled with a new object I didn't really talk about because I wanted to make it short and simple. So there is a new object allowing to store these new values that are manual into the database and keep them just as if they were move lines while they actually are not. And by the way, this new object is also used now for the carryover, so it's not exactly an entirely new model that we add on top of each other, because we just generalized the carryover lines that were already there for Odoo 15 and made them a thing that it's used in other contexts.
Okay, I still have one question, but I will have a look at the pad. Which question do you think would be a good one? Maybe the first one. Would it be possible to add a horizontal column with only manual data?
Yeah. So yeah, horizontal column. I guess you're just meaning a column.
I guess.
Okay, so yes, totally. So just adding a column and just put on every line a new expression saying, oh, this will take manual value for this column. Totally possible, no problem.
Easy answer, perfect. Apparently you are amazing. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't know. It's not my job to tell it.
Someone is asking about tags. Can we use that in the formulas?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the tags on move lines, I guess. So just like you did in tax reports in the past. So in formulas, you can do it, but you have to do it in multiple steps. So you need an expression saying, okay, this is going to create a tax tag. If you just, or two expressions then, because otherwise you wouldn't have any formula with the tags. And you need a new expression doing an aggregation. So an aggregation is basically the formula will be interpreted as some difference formula with values from other expressions. And just doing that, no problem. You can take values from any kind of other engine and put them together, add them, sum them, divide them, whatever.
Perfect. So we can still use the tag. That's pretty important, I guess. Maybe one last question, maybe more technical, but how many objects have been removed?
How many objects? A lot. A lot. I don't really have a number, honestly. A lot of them. We removed all the engines, so that's a lot of things. Yeah, tax reports, financial reports, and all the custom stuff. So a lot. For technical depth, it's pretty cool.
Perfect. We'll finish with one last question. What is community? What is enterprise?
So reporting has always been enterprise. I mean, since enterprise exists, so it stays enterprise, but the model declaration is community now, because we wanted to generalize things for the tax reports, and we needed the tax reports to create a tax template. So there are more things in community than before.
Perfect. Thank you again for the talk.
My pleasure.
It was very precise and very interesting.
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking questions.
Enjoy your last day.
And thanks, everyone. Goodbye.